Hello, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. We're on the eve of Shabbat HaGadol, feeling pretty lonely. I'm standing here in the chapel at Ansche Chesed. I wish you were all here with me. Wish we were all celebrating Shabbat together, but we want to connect even in this virtual medium for a little bit and to share some words with you for Shabbat HaGadol. I want to talk for a few minutes about how difficult this Passover is and perhaps some resources for how we can still make it a Chag. Everyone is asking, how do we make this year feel like Pesach? Some of us will be literally alone in our apartments, and almost all of us will be missing people who are usually around our tables. It doesn't feel like the world is all coming back together at springtime the way we're accustomed at Pesach. To use Kabbalistic language, there's a really hard klippah, a hard shell around this holiday, and we all are going to have to work to crack open the shell, to release the sweetness and the fruit within. Perhaps one answer to our problems is in the way this year's Pesach is closer to the first Pesach than perhaps any in our lives. There's a concept in rabbinics, in Tractate Pesachim, that there's a difference between Pesach Mitzrayim, the original Passover, those many, many thousands of years ago in Egypt, and Pesach Dorot, the Passover that Jews will celebrate subsequent to that. In some ways they're similar, in some ways they're different. The Mishnah says, Ma ben Pesach Mitzrayim the Pesach Dorot. What's the difference between the original one and the subsequent ones? There's any number of things. You didn't have to get the lamb 4 days in advance afterwards. You didn't have to spread blood on the doorpost. But one of the main things is that the original Pesach was ne'echal b'chipazon. It was eaten in chipazon, in haste. And in subsequent generations, it was not eaten in haste. That word chipazon is described in the Torah as the stage directions, as it were, for how one ate the Pesach sacrifices. Kacha tochlu oto, b'motnechem chagurim, na'alechem b'raglechem, makelchem b'yedchem, ve'achaltem oto b'chipazon. This is how you should eat it. Your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it hurriedly, for this is the Pesach to the Lord. This seems to be the description for how people on that original day, but then probably at an early stage in the Bible, they acted, in post-biblical times, they acted out how it was that the ancestors left Egypt. They got dressed up for traveling, they put their staves in their hands, and they pretended to hurry out of Egypt. That word chipazon is not a very common word. Clearly, in context, it means hastily. That's why the dough is unleavened. They didn't have time for it to rise. It means urgency. The Israelites wanted to get out of Egypt as quickly as they possibly could, and the Torah says the Egyptians wanted to be rid of them already, and they forced them out. I would say, though, that the word chipazon in its poetic dimensions also connotes a kind of panic. You might be familiar with this word from the Unetzana Tokef, the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur prayer. It says, Malachim yechafezun, chil ura'ada yochezun. The angels were bechipazon, yechafezun, and they were seized with fear and trembling. That fear and trembling part has a lot to say to us for this year's Pesach. Why were they seized with fear and trembling on that original Passover? What was going on outside their door? The very next verse in the Torah from Exodus chapter 12 says, Va'avarti be'eretz Mitzrayim ba'layla hazeh, v'hiketi kol bechor be'eretz Mitzrayim. God says, I'm going through the land of Egypt and I'm smiting the firstborn, human and animal, and you are going to put the blood on your doorpost as a sign to me or to the angel, destroying angel. V'lo yihiyeh bachem negev l'mashchit b'hakoti be'eretz Mitzrayim, so that no plague destroys you as I'm striking the land of Egypt. Moses conveys to the people of Israel that there is something scary out there. When Moses gives the people the instructions for how to celebrate this Pesach, he says, "V'atem lo tetzu ish mipetach beito ad boker," and you, nobody should go out of your front door until the morning. Don't leave your houses. Or to say in modern parlance, Moses says to them, there's something scary out there. You need to shelter at home. The Midrash says that once a plague is out there in the world, the plagues do not distinguish between the righteous and the wicked. Once dangerous forces are loosed on this world, all bets are off, and you don't know where it is going to land and what harm it's going to inflict. So stay home. I'm sure that sounds all familiar to us right now. That first Pesach was a night of impending liberation and also very present panic, fear of what might befall them just outside of their homes. Those of you who like Game of Thrones, remember Game of Thrones? Remember that the night is dark and full of terrors, and the people certainly understood it that night. Those original Israelites awaited liberation with a sense of profound vulnerability. There was blood on their doorposts. It's a rich poetic image, the blood on the doorpost. It signifies the brit that binds all of the Jewish people. It signifies a kind of birth imagery, as if the people is being born through those doorposts. I also think that the blood on the doorposts indicates a sense that they were sitting amidst a place that might be death. They were afraid, they were liberated, they were vulnerable, and they celebrated. Each year, I think that feeling of urgency belongs in our Seder. You know, we American Jews were very accustomed to our comfort, our success, our thriving, all of which are wonderful. And I think we can get in touch with a little bit of the sense of throughout history. Think of Jews in Spain during pogrom times, in Eastern Europe during pogrom times. I don't want to ever rush too close to the Holocaust. Those become cliched and debased images. But think about Jews marking Pesach in Eastern European ghetto cities. Those were times of chipazon. Those were times of fear. And people cracked open the fear to be able to rejoice together and feel a sense of liberation. You know, Maimonides' Haggadah, before it says halach ma'anya, it begins with the phrase, Bivehilu yatzanu mimitzrayim. That's Aramaic translation for chipazon. We left Egypt in the hurried and urgent panic, and this is the bread we ate. The Mishnah that I alluded to before says chipazon only was in the first Pesach. It's not for Pesach Dorot. I'm afraid that's wrong. The Mishnah perhaps didn't envision that this year we can understand Yetziat Mitzrayim in a different way than before, maybe better than before, because we can understand chipazon. This is the maror that goes with the feast. It's the bitter herbs. It's the scary part that goes with the liberation. This year, we will celebrate our Seders in a sense of panic and urgency because there's a plague out there and it does not distinguish who it strikes. Some members of our community have already been ill, and God forbid, some others might become so. We're going to have to shelter in place, and those doorposts are metaphorically marked with the blood of our own vulnerability. Maybe you're afraid this Passover, and maybe you should be. So be afraid and celebrate. The ancient Israelites had it in them to contend both with their real vulnerability and not let it crush them. They found a way to celebrate family by family and absorb the message that they do not belong as slaves in someone's empire. They are not avadim leFaro, they are avdei Hashem. They're not slaves to Pharaoh, but they're servants to God. They had it in them, and you have it in you too. You have the strength not to be overwhelmed by the real challenges out there. You have the strength to incorporate your fear into your celebration. It's not a fairy tale. A fairy tale has only happy endings. Real life has both illness and healing. It has maror, it has matzah, it has chipazon, and it has liberation. So how do you discover it within yourself? You need a classic virtue. A classic virtue, you can find it going back to Aristotle. You need courage. Courage doesn't really sound like a terribly modern phrase. It sounds like the kind of thing that people say looking back to the quote unquote old manly virtues. But I think it's still very important, and I don't think that we modern people should set it aside. Life is hard, and life will sometimes knock you around. And courage is what you need to endure and stand up for yourself. If you're going to live a moral life, the things that you stand for are not always going to come easy. Sometimes they're going to come hard, and then you're going to need courage to be able to stand up in the face of the things that scare you or that are your obstacles. So I'm going to share with you my mantra for how it is that I feel a sense of courage, how I cultivate that in myself. This is what I pray for. It's what I pray for every day, and especially this year. It's a verse from Psalm 51. Lev tahor berali Elohim, veruach nachon chadesh bekirbi. Lord, create in me a pure heart, a good heart, a sensitive, generous, unselfish heart. And ruach nachon chadesh bekirbi, renew in me a ruach nachon, a ready spirit. You'll sometimes see that word nachon translated as steadfast or well-established. And if you open up your translation of Psalm 51, that's fine. But one of the major biblical Hebrew meanings of nachon is to be ready. To be comparable to our modern Hebrew word muchan, same root. To be nachon is to be ready for what life throws at you. I will be ready for what comes. I will not dissolve. I will not collapse. I will be strong enough and courageous enough to bear the challenge to endure the chipazon, the panic and the urgency of this moment, to be able to celebrate my own liberation. I wish you a sweet and kosher Pesach. I wish you a wonderful Shabbat, and I look forward to us getting together again, face to face, in person here in Shul. Shabbat Shalom.